from what I heard from James and from Peter is that we're going to develop a Wonder Woman 3 together.
Okay, let's talk about this. So, it looks like Wonder Woman 3 might be happening after all. And Gal Gadot, now this is an interview that, let me just start off by kind of giving you guys some context, because the whole internet is freaking out over this for good reasons, bad reasons, trying to figure out like, oh, what does this mean for the DCU? And will Gal Gadot still be the same Wonder Woman as we saw in the DCEU? So before we, go any further, let me just give you some context. Gal Gadot was promoting the movie Heart of Stone, Heart of Stone, something like that. It's a Netflix movie. There's an article over here on my right side here that you guys can see. This is something where she was talking to comicbook.com, and that's when this came up. This interview, Heart of Stone, that's the name of the movie. This interview was done in June of 2023, so it's been a couple of months from when it's publicly come out. And I can imagine that this was anticipated, that the strike was going to be potentially going on with the actors, so they wouldn't be able to do this stuff now, so they did all of that promotional stuff early. They usually record these interviews well in advance anyway, but now that the movie is set to come out on, I think it's on August 11th that the movie comes out, so it's we're not that far away, so all these interviews and promotional stuff is coming out now. So of course one of the questions, and I think it's pretty far along in the interview, like the comicbook.com has put this video on the on YouTube and on their website. You can go check it out. I think the quote comes up like a little past the halfway point, once they're kind of done talking about most of the movie itself that they're actually promoting in the interview. And then he's like, oh, I work for the interviewer Chris Killian. He asked the question, well, I work for comicbook.com, so of course, what are you doing with Wonder Woman? And so then Gal Gadot goes and she says, well, I love portraying Wonder Woman, and it's so close and dear to my heart. From what I heard from James and from Peter, James Gunn and Peter Safran, that is that we're going to develop a Wonder Woman 3 together. Now, again, this quote is from June, and I've looked at James Gunn's Threads account. I've looked at his Twitter. There's no updates. There's no refuting this statement from James Gunn. Also, one other thing for me to point out is that if you look back on this article that I'm sharing now, this article is from June 20th, around the same time when this other interview was done, by the way. So similar time period, but the difference being that Gal Gadot's quotes for this article on Deadline, they were released in June, whereas the video for comicbook.com and that other story has been released now because they were promoting a movie that doesn't come out till August. So also in the Deadline article, Gal Gadot said something similar. They were like talking to her about, she was at the Tudum Festival with Netflix. So another Netflix thing, because she's been working with Netflix on the Heart of Stone movie. Which is meant to be, I think, like a Mission Impossible-esque thing, which I don't know how well that's going to turn out. But anyway, back to the main story. Things are being worked at behind the scenes, and once the right moment arrives, you'll know about it. That's what Gadot said to E.T. at the time when she was, promoting the Tudum Festival. So what does this mean? Well, here's what I'm going to say. This isn't a bad thing. It's not. Like, honestly, we don't know if there's going to be a Wonder Woman 3 yet, because we would need to hear it from the horse's mouth, and in this case that would be James Gunn, because he's the one who's leading this whole thing, the new DCU. We haven't heard from him about that. The only thing we've heard from him is that when he made the whole new announcement for Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters, and for the new DCU, with things like Superman Legacy, all the other projects, Creature Commandos. They also mentioned they were going to be working on Paradise Lost, and that was going to be a series that I think they described it as an HBO quality Game of Thrones-esque prequel to the Wonder Woman, the mythology that we know of pertaining to Princess Diana. So this looks like it might predate her character, or maybe, you'll see a very young Diana in there. So that's the only thing that's Wonder Woman related that we really have heard of officially for the new DCU. But even that project doesn't have a date. Like, we don't know when they're going to go into production on that, when that's going to release, if it's going to be on Max, which is most likely to be the case, or if it's going to be somewhere else. If they end up, somehow changing their mind and making it a movie instead, we don't know. All we got was part of that big DC announcement that James Gunn made. So I don't think this is a bad thing, because we don't know if this is going to happen. And then B, if it does happen, then the first Wonder Woman movie made like $800 million, like almost $800 million. The second one, yeah, it wasn't as good, and it came out during the pandemic. I think if it came out and it wasn't the pandemic and it wasn't on HBO Max at the same time as it was in theaters, it would have made, a decent amount of money. Probably not as much as the first one, but more than it certainly made. I think it made like definitely less than $300 million. It was probably even less than 200 if I remember correctly. So it wasn't very much, but it was like at the peak of the pandemic, and I remember that they had to give big payouts to Gal Gadot, Patty Jenkins, like who had back end points and on the movie, and because they weren't going to get any money from what was going to be a very terrible box office, they had to pay, do extra payouts and kind of figure out this like whole release plan. And so the whole second Wonder Woman movie kind of, I think became a wash, regardless of how good or bad it was. Because let's be honest, even the Suicide Squad, which was much better reviewed, made by James Gunn, had basically the same numbers at the box office as Wonder Woman 1984. So it wasn't so much the quality of the movies at the time that mattered. It was just the COVID pandemic was killing everything right in its tracks. So and some movies they just didn't want to sit on them for years and years, like the sat on Top Gun Maverick, for example. So yeah, I mean, once again, it's not a bad thing. Calm down. This is not a confirmed announcement. And she made this comment in an interview in June of this year, around which time she also made another comment in another interview, which was publicized in June. The only difference is this interview didn't become public until today, because the movie she's promoting in the interview itself, that's coming out in August. So that, it's not semantics, but it's like a timing thing. Her I don't know, maybe like in the time between June and now, James Gunn called her and said, hey man, or hey girl, don't make any new comments like this, because we didn't really guarantee that. But this was shot 2 months ago, so it just happens to be that it's coming out into the public eye now. And yeah, the second point that I was going to make here is that James Gunn has always said that this isn't a hard reboot of the DC universe, DC extended universe, whatever you want to call it, DCEU into the DCU, and he has not refuted these comments from Gal Gadot. He didn't refute these comments in June when she made those comments publicly for the ET interview. He did not refute these comments, today or yesterday, since the comicbook.com story has come out, which once again I'll put that on screen. So yeah, the Paradise Lost is the series that's going to be the prequel to Wonder Woman. We don't know how it's going to tie into the DCU as a whole. One thing I will say though about Paradise Lost, or the Wonder Woman character as a whole, if they decide to soft reboot, and one of the things that they end up keeping is Wonder Woman and her story and her character, and of course Gal Gadot and the role, the first two movies take place in the past. Like, they don't connect very closely to the present day events in the DCEU, almost on purpose, like other than a few scenes in the first Wonder Woman movie, which they can easily retcon, where she gets the picture from Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne from World War One, like, oh, are you that person? Like, he asked her that, and she's like, oh, yeah, it's a long story. And then the second movie is even more removed. Like, I don't think there's really much of any connection between the present day and the past, other than her work as as an art collector or curator working for a museum. So I think they gave themselves plenty of room here, creatively speaking, that if they wanted to retcon those small bits of continuity that won't match from the first two Wonder Woman movies and then incorporate them into the new DCU, they can. I mean, after all, they're going to be bringing Peacemaker and Amanda Waller over as well. We're going to have Aquaman that's looking like with Jason Momoa also coming over into the DCU. So there's going to be holdovers. We don't know what's going to happen with Ezra Miller's Flash, but we do know Ben Affleck's Batman is out. We know that Henry Cavill's Superman is out. And a lot of people are talking about, well, why recast Henry Cavill but not Gal Gadot? And I'm like, it's not a fair comparison, because for the reasons I just talked about, those Wonder Woman movies don't really contradict, or wouldn't really contradict, unless Paradise Lost goes in a whole different direction visually and production design wise, compared to those Zack Snyder led production design on the original Wonder Woman costume, and then he and what they did for the first Wonder Woman movie. So I don't think there's going to be those same issues that you could potentially face with, somebody like Henry Cavill. Whereas with Henry Cavill, I think the biggest reason why they recast the character is because they want a younger Superman, they want a younger Batman. They're thinking more long term. They want to have a franchise now where they're going to do a trilogy of movies or more, or have them do crossovers, and those are things where you start off with actors in their 40s already. You've got less tread. You got a lot more tread on your tires from the start of the franchise than you would if you started off with somebody like David Cornsweet in his 30s. So I think those were probably the bigger reasons, and also it looks like it would create some confusion if they said, okay, Henry Cavill's back, but none of his previous appearances or stories that he's been a part of as Superman matter. So I think to avoid that confusion, they decided also to recast the role. Whereas with Gal Gadot, once again, Wonder Woman, both of those previous movies take place in the past, far removed from the present day events of the Justice League movies of Batman versus Superman. So even, and you can easily write off anything that she has done in the present day continuity because that's no longer going to be valid, but you can still connect the two movies that have taken place in the 80s and then in World War I to the third movie, which could potentially be present day, which would be the first Wonder Woman movie to take place in the present day, or it could be in the past. But yeah, ultimately we'll see where this goes. Let me know what you guys think in the comment below. How does Wonder Woman fit into the new DCU? Because I'm telling you, if they just decided those first two movies were part of the DCU continuity and then just continued on from there, and then you have Paradise Lost as a series, Wonder Woman definitely will be in the new DCU. And it looks like right now, if you go by what Gal Gadot says, she is going to be playing the character, or continuing to play the character. And I personally don't have a problem with that. Let me know if you guys think differently, and let me know if you think that her fit will be as easy and natural to the new continuity of the DCU as I do. Because again, I don't see why they couldn't just tie those two previous movies into the new continuity, even though Wonder Woman 1984 wasn't the best movie. I like the trailer. It's probably one of the best superhero movie trailers I've seen in the last 10 years, but the movie itself definitely a little underwhelming. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Hit the like button, subscribe, of course, that helps us out a lot. And I'll be back here on DCU Daily every day, Monday to Friday, with more news and updates. Until next time, it's been Dan. I'm Dan. It's been good talking to you guys.